So a very warm welcome to everybody. Welcome to those who are here with us live just now. And I've forgotten again which session this is. We are well into the Mahamudra prayer. And a very warm welcome, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, to those who are joining this on YouTube later on. Let's start with our Bodhisattva motivation. Let's start with that. And turning our hearts in love, in care to all our fellow sentient beings, of course, and in particular to those karmically connected with us in this life, whether they're living or dead now, those parents and children and siblings, those who've been so kind to us, helped us on our way, those who've messed us around and given us some interesting bodhisattva challenges, everyone who was part of our karma, we include them very, very specially. But then we also try to feel our mind is endless, without limits. We are, after all, for week upon week, we've been looking at what is mind or what it isn't, and it certainly has no limits. Maybe it doesn't feel like that, but in the reality, it does. So we try and feel part of life everywhere, minds everywhere, this community of minds, which is our bodhisattva vision of the universe. And then, especially today we are remembering Akon Rinpoche very specially, and his message all the time behind everything was compassion. The heart of compassion, the birthplace of compassion, is love in our hearts for everybody. So we try and feel as much love as we can for each and every sentient being. And we feel very, very happy because we are on the path and we have Dharma in our lives. Thank you.
Sonje chodon soje chonamla janjo badu dane chapsunje. Dagi jenso jipe sunamje rola penchira sanje druparasho. Samchan samche dewa dang dewe jodang den parajoche. Dongal dong dukmal je jodang tarawara joche. Dongal mepe dewa damba dang men tralwara joche. Yerin chadan netang tralwe, tanyom chempola ne pare joreche. Doje chanchen telo narodang mapa mela cheche kambopa, tu sum shecha kunchen kamapa che shi chungje chupa zenam lam. Rita tsasong paden drupa so zablam chacha chelan yanipe. Yame droganda po kajula sovan tepso kajula mano. Jupa zeno nampere jinjelo. Shenlo gongji kampara sumpa shen zeno kona chashen me padam. Sede dada chope gongchen na niko shenpa me pere jinjelo. Moko gongji gobara sumpa shen mena tego chepe namala. Jendo sovan depe gongchen na chame moko jewara jinjelo. Yengme gongji ngasho sumpa shen. Kansha tope mo samade, macha de karajope gongchen na. Gongcha lodan shamore jinjelo. Namto mo chukra sumpa shen, chiam mayin chiam chawala. Manga ropa chawe gongchen na. Kode yerme to para jinjelo. Deya tai shame shamawate shameta shadra. Om kurimara chite karota ke orite jovati ollo yane. Vishuddhani male malapane kukure kaka grase grasana. O Mukhi Paramukhi Amukhi Shamme Dhavane Savagraha Bandhanane Negre Tava Savabhava Pravadin Vimukta Marapasha Savitva Buddhamudra Anugatita Savamare Buddharita Parishuddha Vega Shantu Savamara Kama. Pelden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dage Chora Pende De Shula Kadrin Chempo Gone Jizonte Kuson Tuchi Madrup Saldo Sal. So today, as I just mentioned, we are commemorating, I suppose is the word, the passing, the death of Akong Tulku Rinpoche, and I should say something, but what on earth can one say? His life was so amazing, magnificent, such an example of Mahamudra and of compassion, true compassion in action. His work in bringing Dharma to the West was amazing. Just to mention one aspect of it, which is quite singular from what I've seen, quite a few Tibetan lamas, Geshes, Khenpos, Rinpoches came to the West, and they nearly all established centers with themselves as the main focus. Like Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche in America, or whoever it was. Whereas when he established Samiling, what he wanted to do was to bring the very best Tibetan lamas to the West. So he didn't make himself the main teacher. He didn't make his ideas the main teaching in Samiling. And he was incredibly perceptive in as much as he realized. And he was quite young, really. He realized there was this older generation of Tibetan lamas, like Dogo Chensi Rinpoche, Tulku Urgyen, Kala Rinpoche, and all that held Tibetan Buddhism in a way that would disappear in the future. And he was very, very keen for them to come to Samiling. And so he wanted the best teachings in Samiling, so he brought the best scholars over. He wanted the best meditation in Samiling, so he brought the best meditation masters. He wanted the best spiritual blessing for Samiling, so he brought the great spiritual presences like His Holiness Dalai Lama, who came twice. And he stepped completely into the background for this. It took an awful lot of pressure to get him to give any teachings at all. And I think that was exemplary. And when I remember for the first, 25 years, I think it was, of Samiling, I had to make a booklet. And in there was a list of all the teachers that he brought and what they taught. It was amazing, amazing. And it meant that we had access to a very broad view of teachings from the different lineages, Nyingmapa, Kajupa, from different teachers with their different styles, their different feel.
That's one of the beauties of Vajrayana teachers like Gyaltsa Rinpoche, Tai Situpa. They're so different in style, in presence. So anyway, he did something quite wonderful. His work in Africa was extraordinary. And I think some of you know, if you look on akong.eu website, there's lots and lots about him that I've put there. But in 1977, Akong Rinpoche had a very afro hairdo. And quite big Jimi Hendrix type hair, not quite as big as Jimi Hendrix. So that was when the 16th Karmapa was in Europe and in Samiling. And 16th Karmapa was very playful, and he would often grab Rinpoche by the hair like this and take him around with him. And then he would say in English, laughing, he'd say, Africa Lama. And the Tibetans have trouble with the letter F. So Africa is always Africa. It's more like apricot, Africa Lama. So we thought this was because of the afro hairdo. But the 16th Karmapa was unusual. Sometimes on a beautifully clear day, he'd look out the window and say, such terrible rain. And so you just listen. And then the next day it would pour down. And, and when he said things, it was never just for the sake of talking. They had such meaning very, very often. So then eventually Akon Rinpoche became appointed the Kaju representative in Africa, and his wonderful activity did terrific things in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Congo, and of course in Europe. Anyway, today we're remembering him as an example of a real bodhisattva, so dedicated to the well-being of everybody on every level, feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, giving education to those deprived of it, giving orphans a place to be, a feeling of belonging, feeling of purpose and value. In Tibet, preserving Tibetan medicine. And I remember people were stunned. I went to a Tibetan medicine college in conference in Washington, and they were talking about the wonderful accomplishments in Dharamsala. And at first they didn't believe me when I told them that Akon Rinpoche and Rokpa had trained 700 doctors in Tibet. I don't think they wanted really, because there's the whole thing about we don't talk about Tibet because it's China, only about Tibetans in exile. So it was a bit kind of, there was a silence, but it's true. Medicines to make people better when they hurt, and Tibetan medicines so suitable in places where people can't get access to modern medical facilities, too remote. So anyway, he did so much out of concern for the welfare of people, and all I can hope to do is in future lives do as much. And I'm so grateful for everything he gave all of us, and especially to me. So anyway, the best thing I can do to honor his memory is to do what he told me to do and go blah, 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 and share with you some of the Dharma teachings. So Ken is rather stuck in these key verses. Now, where are we in this prayer? We're in the heart of the prayer. We're in a few verses that talk about the view. And as I said before we went into those verses, in Mahamudra, in Dzogchen, in highest yoga tantra, view is everything. If you've got the view, you're more than halfway there. The rest is just whatever you do. Visualizing, mantras, channel energy work, doesn't matter. The view is primordial. And if you don't have the view, no matter how much you bounce up and down doing yogic practices or any of those other things, it won't succeed. It's as simple as that. View is everything. It's primordial. So I'm stuck in this part about the view because it just covers so much. Even though we only have a couple of verses, it touches on so many things. And I'm just making some adjustments here. So usually I go back to the verse we did last week. I think I'd like to go even a bit further back. And now that we've covered a few topics and I've talked through a few things, then in verse 11, it does not exist, even the Buddhas haven't seen it. It is not non-existent, being the basis of samsara and nirvana. So, it does not exist. It is not non-existent. It. Now, I know I've talked about this before. We're talking about Buddha nature. We have a few words, and already at least once I've explained why we need words like it or that. Funny words like suchness, which don't really mean anything, and that's the whole point. We can't pin Buddha mind down to anything. It does not exist as this is something. And it's not just non-existence, total blank. Now, having gone through these ideas about what would exist mean, where something would have lasting, independent, own existence and so on, or non-exist, what would a non-existent be? Then it says in there, it is not a combination of opposites. Now the word here in Tibetan is zungjuk, and we hit the wall of language and thought. You can think, we can think, and it makes sense, and until you stop and look at what you're thinking. Two things in union. Okay? Okay? Two things in union. Union comes from what? Not onion, union. Oneness. Sounds nice in language. Two things unite, become one. So then there's just one. Or are there two together? In which case, how can they be two if they make a oneness? Now, this is just me, words, okay? But what we hit there is one of the big areas of investigation of humanity, of interface of religious ideas in ancient India between all the different schools. So many of them, when they talk about it, or God, or Purusha, or whatever name they've got for the Absolute, many of them, and including the Buddhist, say not two, non-dual. In Sanskrit, that is Advaita. Ad means not. Vait means two. So, not two. But whether not two means, so it's not two, right? Not two. Not two. That's wrong. But whether not two means one, the great oneness, the great one mind, the great one being, or not, there they disagree. In our Kagyu tradition, what I need to tell you is that we believe in not two, non-dual. When we talk about it, the ultimate state, Buddha mind, not dual. But we don't talk about oneness. That's as much as I can say without us taking a big detour into Nagarjuna and also, mainly Nagarjuna, where we have what's called the argument of neither one nor many. But I do need to flag that up. And Tai Situpa, when he is teaching this text, the present Tai Situpa, then he does make a point about this term, zungjuk. So the way that our teachers normally express zungjuk, they say it's not like a black thread and a white thread, or lots of black threads and lots of white threads, all woven together so that when you look from a distance, it looks like a gray robe. So when we did that verse, then I don't think I mentioned what I just mentioned. I do want to highlight it now. So black threads and the white threads would be the combinations of opposites. Now, what are we talking about here, rather than abstract language and philosophy? What happens every moment? It doesn't exist. We can't find an existence. Every moment happens and is gone. We can't catch it. We can't find it. We can't define it. We can put names on it, but we can't find something that lasts. Especially once we realize everything is mind, happening in our mind. Once we meditate and look at mind, every split second is changing. Nothing that exists is there all the time. Definite. So each moment is like that, but then is it just nothing? Just nothing. I'll read you some Tai Situpa later, quote what he teaches. And he says, it can't be nothing because he was aware of the nothing. Nothing's nothing. I mean, there's nothing anywhere. Nothing aware, nothing to be aware of. It's not nothing. And this is happening every moment. Philosophers can rattle on about it, but right now, you, for me, for you, wherever we go, whatever's happening to us, whenever violent life is wonderful, when it's violent, is that real? Does it have an own reality? Not. It doesn't exist. But it's not total nothingness, because somebody is there and something happened, seemed to happen, it's gone already, but something seemed to happen. When we explore the nothingness, it can be so vast. Again and again, nothing, 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 nothing. All of life, you go through your day. Yeah, that person, hello, good morning. And then this, you've got food coming into your mouth. And then you're under the shower having something's happening. But then the nothingness of it, the fact that it's like quicksilver, doesn't last a second. It's so vivid. So have we got two very different things? Because especially if you meditate and you do this remedial voidness that I've been talking about in the last few sessions, You're learning through your philosophical training, through your meditation training, to see through the apparent solidity of each moment. You come to the kind of freedom, in a way, of being liberated from the grip of the feel of reality, solidity in what happens to us in life. But there can seem to be a conflict or a contrast between these two. Nothingness, the spaciousness, nothing to say, nothing to do, nothing at all. And the manifestation that's happening. So it says, we don't have two things to put together. I can't explain this to you. I'm inviting you to think about what is said in the prayer, in the reality of your own moments of life, of meditation. We can start simply when you're quiet and you're out in the beauty of nature with all of its colors and the smells and, everything sensorial. And then because you're a meditator, you do your voidness, your voidness awareness. No conflict, no contrast, but this zunjuk. Those seeming two things, voidness, manifestation, not two, but not one. A simultaneity. Now, yeah. So there's something else I want to flag up while we're in this area of thinking. I don't know how useful it is, but I think it does need to be. I think it does need to be mentioned. And Mahamudra. And we're studying a prayer about Mahamudra. Now, depending which text, which bit of our lineage inheritance we look at, Karmapa or Mapa when you went to India, or Maitripa, one of Mapa's guru's writings, and so on, then often we come across a word that we find also in Hindu sacred vocabulary, which is sahaja. Sometimes that's put together with Mahamudra, and you hear Sahaja Mahamudra. Okay, that's Sanskrit, but all of it, Sahaja Mahamudra. Sahaja is hard to translate into English. A lot of people use a term that Trungpa Rinpoche coined that I hate, but I need to mention it, and it is co-emergent. I think it's an ugly term. It raises the problem of two things, the duality question. Emergent means emerges from what? Emerges from philosophically. That's not good. So much of Chandrakirti's teaching, Nagarjuna's teaching about shunyata, voidness, is about how things do not arise, emerge. But anyway, a lot of people use this term, co-emergent. In my translations, then you can use innate, where one thing is innate to another. I've gone blank about the other words we use to translate it. But anyway, there is this term sahaja, which is often sort of almost interchangeable with Mahamudra. Sometimes you get Sahaja Mahamudra, and sometimes you get just Mahamudra. Now, when Jumpo Naojo, I think, who's one of Gampopa's disciples, when he was asking questions, he asked Gampopa, he says, is Sahaja the same as Mahamudra or not? That particular disciple had been to India, he'd studied quite a lot, and these questions about duality, non-duality, Sahaja, and Gampopa gave him a terrific and a definitive answer. That's what I want to share with you. I'm not sure how much this is meaningful for you, but I do feel the need to share this, right? And it's very interesting. And if ever you get into, is there a difference between Dzogchen and Mahamudra, and so on, it becomes even more interesting. So there, Sahaja has this idea of seems like to, voidness, manifestation, seems like to, but they are absolutely inseparable. Hence all of this male-female iconography, and so on. Seems like two, but they are in total fusion, union. Fusion is quite a good word. Although linguistically, it still has the same problem. Fusion means two things, right? Fuse. So, anyway. So with Sahaja, we are looking at nearly all of our Mahamudra path of training and practice, meditation, what the Guru teaches us, how we combine each moment of experience with deepest blessing, and so on and so on. So we need to, first of all, bring the awareness of voidness into each living moment, rather than being caught in the illusion, the solidity, reactivity, interpretation, projection. We see through the solidity, and in breaking through, we come to shunyata, voidness. So again and again we do that on a gross level, less gross, more and more subtle, until it becomes second nature, very fluid. And as we go through the day, we are Mahamudra, smoothness. One example, it says, like a dandelion, the dandelion fluff rolling across the hillside. So we move through life. We don't get caught up in everything. We blow across, and we are light. We have a very light touch. We don't get involved with people and arguments and all sorts of things and steamed up about them, or involved in any way. Life's going on there. Nothing much you can do about it sometimes. But in our own mind, we need to find freedom. So in Mahamudra, freedom, but still life's happening. So this Sahaja is bringing that fusion of each unique moment of reality created by cause and effect. Understanding its interdependence, we get to the voidness. Seeing through its apparent solidity and reality, we get to the voidness. So most of our path of Mahamudra practice is Sahaja. Fusion, integration, finding the innate nature of everything. But whereas the everything that manifests moment after moment, uniquely, once off, never comes back. It's your life, nobody else knows your life from the inside. And your life has been a series of unique moments, never reproduced. And every one of the billions of beings are these unique moments. That's unique. The fact of their voidness is the same. So after, as the years roll by and your Mahamudra practice rolls by, you become very smooth, experienced practitioner. And the voidness of each moment is there. That voidness in itself becomes, default state of your mind, status quo. So I wanted to mention that middle way. This, in that verse, it says, simultaneity, the middle way, may that true nature of mind, may the true nature of mind, free from all extremes, be realized. That's the prayer. Now, what we need to be very clear is that now in the next verse that we looked at last time and the time before, we are talking about it, which is that true nature of mind. We've moved, we've edged slowly in the way we were told a few verses ago. First, we have to realize everything is mind. Then we have to realize mind, everything's mind. Yeah. But mind is, no mind, can't find it, voidness. And then in the third line it says, even though you can't find it and there's shunyata, there's voidness, there is constant manifestation. So now this it cannot be shown by any statement as this is it. It. What? Buddha. True nature of mind. Dhammadhatu. Dhammakaya. So many words. It. And then last time I mentioned, and I want to come back to that, we have a need for a narrative. We are safe with a narrative. Just this last week, a few things that have come to my awareness. Just a second. I see how people are comforted by a narrative. Let's take a simple example. Remember in the early days of mobile phones, and then people of a certain age would often say, well, we don't really need one, but you never know. If our car gets stuck, then it's very useful because I can call my daughter, I can call my son and get some help. So they kind of wanted to justify. And quite often people want to, we bought a new car, and they give reasons why they absolutely needed a new car. And then when we get into deeper things, tragedies, trauma, then a narrative can sometimes really be the way you live with it. When somebody dies, we say, well, in the end, it was a release, it was a relief. All sorts of words we tell ourselves. Now, that's life. We see it everywhere. It's a big, important part of life. We don't immediately lose that habit when we start meditating. We need a story about who we are, what we're doing, what the Buddha is, words and words, ideas, teachings, stuff, and then in particular, meditation, the mind, what is the true nature of mind, avoidance, three kayas, resting the mind in Dhammadhatu. And people hear those words, they don't have a clue. Teachers say, no, let's sit down, rest our mind in Dhammadhatu. How many people know what Dhammadhatu is? We can sit down and kind of do something. We have a new language we adopt. It's a comfort zone. It's a safe space. And when we look at more powerful Vajrayana teachings and teaching stories, then we see how that safe space, that comfort zone, is rocked by the teacher, or sometimes simply by the beautiful power of circumstance. So what, in his great kindness and compassion, Karmapa is trying to do here through his words, he's telling us about it. He's telling both philosophers and meditators. It, where we're going, Buddha, Buddha mind, Shunyata, Dhammadhatu, whatever we call it, true nature of mind. It cannot be shown by any statement. This is it. Now, I talked about that last time. I don't want to go back and say the same words about this need to be able to pin something down, to have reference points. What I want to do is to carry on from there to say, now what happens in our Dhammakaju tradition? Although we have texts, and in particular, Maitreya's teachings about Buddha nature, the nature of mind, and then there are many wonderful Mahamudra, Dzogchen poems, songs about the nature of mind. We will always hear those teachings, read those words with our own acquired mindset, our own acquired hermeneutics, our own acquired paradigms. We bring everything we are to the words of the Buddha, the words of Milarepa, great teachers. We translate them in that way, and they can be translated in many, many ways. Now, today we're commemorating Akon Rinpoche, whose main presence and teaching was compassion. So one of the big traps or pitfalls we must avoid is the scholar's pitfall of thinking that all of the wonderful teachings of Nagarjuna about shunyata, non-existence, emptiness, that when our own head gets itself around those, you get it, you understand it. That is not the same as realizing voidness, shunyata. We understood conceptually about samsara. So it says there's no statement that can convey to you, this is it. Even if dear old Nagarjuna came into your sitting room just now and you sat with him for the next 12 years and he was telling you words and you were listening and thinking about it, there is no conceptual communication. There are no words where all of a sudden, yeah, got it, right? Oh, and that, oh, wow, light bulb moment. Yeah, great, Nagarjuna. I got you, I read you, we're on the same page. No way. No way. And what happens? So many people get this. It is a pathway to enlightenment where we master the teachings, the conceptual teachings on shunyata, then apply them to meditation. But the pitfall is that somewhere in there compassion gets lost. Or it was never developed with the same strength as the intellect and the brain. If compassion was the body, sometimes it, in the teachings, it says compassion is like the legs that actually take you to enlightenment. If you don't have compassion, you're crippled. And it says wisdom, meaning mainly the teachings on shunyata, are the eyes. They show you where to go. If you can see where to go, but you're crippled, you can't move, you can't go. So Karmapa says, there are no words, there's no conceptual transmission. So what we do in the Karmakaju school is to be clear and sure what is this truth of mind, truth of your mind, my mind, Buddha, the Buddha nature of mind, the true nature of mind. Then we need to be introduced to it by our guru. Term in Tibetan is motra. Motra means to be introduced. The first syllable no actually means face, to be put face to face with something. Or it's like I can show a picture and say, this is what Karmapa looks like or whatever. Motra means you're introduced to the face of reality. This happens after much preparation in the presence of the guru, sitting with the guru, who, because of our preparation, we are able to sit quietly, very quietly. And we've done the mind analytical work of looking for mind, looking for its location, its color, and so on. We've done all of that, cleared up a lot of stuff, cleared a lot of ground through the donkey work, the spade work of meditation. But then in that time, then we are introduced to the truth of reality ourselves by the guru. This is usually called these days pointing out, but Tai Situpa laughs about that. He says, what could you point to? These two verses are just telling us exactly the opposite. There's nothing you can point to and say, that's it. This is enlightenment as opposed to something else. Of course, it's not the donga like that. Of course not. But maybe you've got some idea of what enlightenment's like. Maybe you've got some idea of what enlightenment is like. Has to go. It can't be one thing and not everything else. This is what these verses are telling us. They can't be, this is enlightenment, and that isn't. You can't be sitting on a lotus full of rainbows and seeing everything wonderfully and so on in a visionary state. That happens. Wonderful meditation experiences. There are so many states of elevated consciousness beyond this human state. So subtle. And if we have any idea, or like total nothing, gone, quiet, blank, nothingness. We have ideas. Not only that, we have had experience, sometimes sublime experience. And we feel that enlightenment is getting back there. It, whatever Mahamudra, enlightenment is, cannot be a this is it. Because if this is it, it means something else isn't it. It is Mahamudra, mudra, the seal that stamps everything. Not one thing, not one thing, everything. So if we have any idea at all that enlightenment is this and Dharmakaya is this, then we miss the point. So it cannot be shown by any statement. That's it. And there's nothing that is not it. Okay, that sounds nice philosophically. Think of the most evil, disgusting things you can think of. Things that make your flesh creep, that you can't imagine, for instance, that human beings could do to each other. There is nothing which is not it. What does this mean? So there's a lot to think about in these lines. It's quite challenging. When you've got a religion, a faith, an idea where all the good things are up there and all the rubbish is down here, then it's okay, will be very helpful. Can be very helpful for being less rubbishy in what you do and for aiming towards something which is lighter and finer and so on. But here we're talking about the truth, the truth about everything, something that is there even in the darkest, dirtiest, foulest of situations. Nothing which is not it. So we need to find this it, this nature of everything. So in the teachings of Mahamudra and also in Asanga's teachings, Maitreya's teachings, it says there's no example at all, but the only example which can maybe help us, or metaphor, is space. Because space pervades everything, all the material things. They couldn't exist were it not for space. If there were no space, everything would be just one single particle. Things can only exist because of space. All of the interdependent relative reality can only exist because of space. Space is always there. It's always there. We can't really say what it is, space, because the very definition of space is nothing's there. Right? We have exactly this same situation. What's space? I can tell you what is wood. This is wood. I can tell you what is brass. This is brass. I can tell you what is fire. Don't have any fire just now. But I can't tell you what is space. We all know what it is, kind of. And my hands couldn't clap if there wasn't space between them. What's between them? And then the hand itself there has to be space for it to exist. And especially now we know if you could zoom right down, they would say it's 99.99% space. And I don't know why they say that, because if you say, well, what is the 0.00001% then? Can't tell you. It's all space. So this is an example. Space is omnipresent, but it's very hard to say what it is. Now, we're not looking at space. We're looking at the most sacred space that is timeless and changeless, that has always been, which is Buddha mind. Will never change. It's here right now. It's everywhere right now. Everywhere right now. Nothing you can say, that's it. It's not gorgeously rose perfumed or anything like that. There's nothing you can say, that's it. But it's everywhere. So there's nothing which is not a manifestation, let's say, of it. Now, so we need this introduction to what on earth all this is talking about. Otherwise, we can sit and read endless Dzogchen Mahamudra texts, we can listen to Milarepa's songs, make our own idea of it, and it will be very colored by our own history. So an enlightened teacher needs, through their most wonderful, wonderful compassion and connection with lineage, to share with us as was shared with them, something so sacred, which is this sacred space, the very nature of which is compassion. In the White Lotus Great Compassion Sutra, Buddha says, if you could put all of my teachings, all of them, in the palm of the hand, into one thing, and to say, what's it all about? It will be compassion. Not blah, blah, blah about shunyata, compassion. So we need to sit with the great compassionate one, the Buddha, in the presence of our Guru, to feel this timeless, changeless space of universal love in all of its clarity that no words can describe, and that pervades everything and everyone. Now, that introduction to the nature of mind is absolutely vital in the Kagyu teachings. There's no way around it. If we do the right preparations, it will happen. Simple as that. No matter how unlikely that might seem, there are many ways, even in dream, in which we can meet our teacher. If we're ready and prepared, especially through foundation practices and so on, then it will happen. So I've kind of just talked this morning. It's not very structured, but I've been trying to get some of the weight of these sentences across to you. And I wanted to share a few exceptional stories of pointing out, because a bit of, how do you say, light entertainment in the middle of all this heavy stuff. Now, most of the time, this pointing out or this introduction to the nature of mind happens, as you might expect, master and disciple, probably in a monastery or retreat center, sitting quietly in meditation, and then it happens. One of my deepest experiences ever was sitting with Akon Rinpoche, and I asked him about his pointing out of mind from his guru, Shechen Kontrol. I thought he'd say something, but all of a sudden he went very, very, very quiet. I can't say there were tears in his eyes, but there probably were. But the silence, the inability just to say anything about it, but in that moment, it's amazing. I felt Shechen Kontrol's presence, and this whole power of the lineage behind. We're in the most sacred moment, because Akon Rinpoche had done the best part of a year of Mahamudra training under him. Then, in the monastery, in the interview, then the transmission takes place. But not always. And sometimes is almost the opposite, because one has a preconceived idea of it, rather than thinking that it is everywhere, all the time, in everything, in everyone. There's a kind of an it, which is a sacred it up there, or in a certain, holy circumstance. So I wanted to share a couple of stories. One I really like, It's a story of a tulku, Naten Chuling. Chuling is short for Chogyur Lingpa. Chogyur Lingpa was a wonderful Terma master. And if you go to Samiling and you see in the entrance there's a stained glass figure holding up a Vajra and a Purva, that's Chogyur Lingpa. And there's a connection between him and Akon Rinpoche. And I mustn't get it wrong, but I think Akon Rinpoche had one of the Vajras from a Chogyur Lingpa Dhamma. Anyway, it's very special to Akon Rinpoche. So Chogyur Lingpa becomes Chorling. And this was the reincarnation of Chogyur Lingpa from a place called Naten. So he's called Naten Chorling. And he was a disciple of Chensi Rinpoche, Jamyang Chensi. He was young. He was a young tulku and incredibly bright. And one of these kids who learns so quickly, and sometimes, when they're learning a text, the teacher's teaching it and they can already recite, because they remember it from past lives, the rest of the text, and so on. So he learned very quickly. He became incredibly good at debate. And the famous people for debate in Tibet were in the Gelugpa tradition in the three big monasteries in central Tibet, Sera, Drepung, so on. So he was a teenager, I think, and he had it in his head, I'm going to go to central Tibet and debate with those guys and kind of, knock the socks off them and show them that our Kagyu tradition, or in that case, it was probably Nimapa tradition, that we also have wonderful debaters. So he asked his Lama, Chensi Rinpoche, for permission to go. And Chensi Rinpoche, very wise, he said, oh yeah, if you must, of course. But maybe wait a couple of days, because I'm giving an empowerment next week as a kind of good connection between us. Why don't you just stay for the empowerment? He said, yes, of course. Now, I don't know if it was just a glorious coincidence or coaccident, as Akon Rinpoche used to say, or whether Chensi Rinpoche got the monastery cook to make beans for the day before the empowerment. But it so happened that Nating Churling, on the morning of the empowerment, had an incredible amount of gas in his belly. And now, so in the empowerment, big monastery, big monastery, the tulkus, the Rinpoches, they sit in the front row. And even if the one giving the empowerment doesn't go all the way around with the ceremonial vase, touching people on the head and giving them the liquid drink, at least he does the Rinpoches and the Khenpos in the front row. And then very often they're given secondary vases that they go around doing the bonking on the head. So Nitin Churling's in the front row and full of gas. Now, what you need to know culturally is you can burp as much as you want in Tibet. It's fine. It's not a problem. But farting is still embarrassing. And so he was holding in the gas and really not wanting to fart. So then Chensi Rinpoche comes down, and as he comes to Nitin Churling, they expect to bang on the head and pour the liquid. And instead, he kicked him in the stomach. And so he let out the most gigantic amount of gas and sonorous fart, totally embarrassing. But in that moment of breaking the powerful continuum of habitual thinking, there was a mind-to-mind contact with Chensi Rinpoche, and Nitin Churling saw so clearly the Buddha mind, Buddha nature of mind, true nature of himself. And as he said, after that, I lost all interest in going to central Tibet and debating, because he had seen through the conceptual power of the conceptual mind. Even great meditators have this. They have an idea of enlightenment. They have all the Dharma ideas. They've been packed in for years. They've studied them. They've worked with them. They've applied them. Something needs to bust that building. So that's one story. That's stating Chuling, Jangyam Chenchi. And then there's a very famous one from Patrul Rinpoche and Nushul Lungtok. Now, Nushul Lungtok was interesting. He had received pointing out, but it kind of hadn't stuck. Patrul Rinpoche knew this. They're in the same area. And then this Nushul Lama kept having a dream that there was some Tibetan wool, black yak hair wool, that was all tangled up, and that Patrul Rinpoche came and untangled it so easily. And so Patrul Rinpoche at that time was doing a Dzogchen practice, which is where you blend your mind with space. So he was going out at night time and lying on the hillside underneath that huge Tibetan starry sky and just letting his mind and space merge. I'd done a tiny bit of this under Khenpo Sotin, and it's a wonderful meditation. Anyway, Patrul Rinpoche was doing that, and he invited Nyosho to come that night. Because he was very, very clairvoyant, Patrul Rinpoche, he knew about Nyosho's dream of the black wool, the black thread, and he said, come tonight, we'll untangle that black wool of yours. And so Nyosho went out at night time. He finds Patrul Rinpoche lying on the hillside like this. And Patrul said, oh, yeah, lie down. Yeah, let's just look at the space for a while. So they're kind of there, chilled out. Their minds blended with space. Then all of a sudden, woof! A dog barks. And because of the presence, the intimacy, the sharing, then Patrul Rinpoche said, that's it. And Nyosho got it. Just the bark of a dog, but at one and the same time, because it interrupted that gone with space. Meditators can understand that, right? You're there, you sit quietly, your mind fuses with space, it's infinite, quiet. Must be it. And in the middle of the quiet, not space, dogs aren't well seen in the East. So, what? That's it. So, and then afterwards, Patrul Rinpoche said, now you see the stars. That's it too. In the sea, in the moment of seeing. So that's another story. There's another one. They're all well-known stories, these, but they're the best, really are. This Gampopa, I think it was Pamodrupa, his disciple, studied a lot. I mean, he had a very famous Sakyapa guru before, and he'd studied, and all of these questions, like Sahaja Mahamudra, Sahaja, is it Mahamudra, is Mahamudra something different, and all of this. He had a little list of questions that he hadn't found satisfactory answers to. He'd done the rounds of great teachers. It was kind of his test. And, okay, been thinking about this, can you tell me? No one, two. And so he got an interview when he first went to see Gampopa. And Gampopa was there having his lunch. Now, Tibetan lunch is often tsampa, is barley flour, and you mix it with butter with your fingers, you dip it in tea to make it a bit wet, and you roll the balls, you make it's a whole kind of get your appetite going, get you salivating kind of thing. And then eventually you pop the ball in your mouth and you chew it, and very, very nourishing. So Gambopa's there and with this, doing his Sampa thing and listening to Mahamudrupa's questions. And I think he knows, this is kind of a test. And so then he catches his mind. It's a pointing out moment. And he says, there's far more truth in this ball of dough than there'll ever be in any of these questions, ideas, these deep concerns in the end. But is Mahamudra Sahaja, or isn't it? And then there's this tradition from Sahaja where they write this, and then he writes that, and then the Sakyapas think this, and the Kajupas say that, and then Guru Rinpoche, he said this. And you go, what's the truth? None of it. The real truth. Woof, woof, or pff, fart. The real truth is in each moment. It is not co-emergent. It's innate to each moment. Zonjuk. Every moment. Then one more story. Now, what did I want to tell you about? Oh yeah, Patrol himself, and then his person who, it's the same thing. Patrol Rinpoche had pointing out of mind from his own teachers, wonderful teachers, but somehow, can you say, they didn't stick, they didn't make the quantum leap. And also, their pointing out is not just one thing that's the same for everybody. There's Dharmacharya pointing out, there's a Sambhogakaya form of pointing out, there is a 6 paramitas way of pointing out, and there are different ways. They can be step by step pointing out. It's not always the one. The real one and only pointing out is when you get it. Buddha mind. You get it. So Patrol Rinpoche had pointing outs of different sort, but it still hadn't made that quantum leap in his practice. Now, there was a master around at the time called Do Chensi, who was very unconventional, to say the least. A very famous Buddhist master, wandered around with a rifle, and anyway, lots of stories about him and his dogs and all sorts of things. Unconventional, very unconventional, but everyone knew that he had it. He was not only enlightened, but he enlightened people. And so one day he came to Patrol Rinpoche. Patrol Rinpoche lived a lot of his life in a tent, simple tent. And so Patrol Rinpoche heard somebody coming. And he hears this drunken voice, "Patrol, you in there?" And he thinks that's Do Chensi. Now, Do Chensi had a hell of a reputation and kind of, what's he going to do now? What's going to happen? And so I don't remember if Patrol went out of the tent or if Do Chensi came into the tent. And it wouldn't be like a modern little camping tent. This is sort of probably an awning or some kind of a yakea tent. But anyway, they get face to face, and Do Chensi reeks of alcohol, of chang. And Patrol thinks, oh no, God, he's drunk. What's going to happen? And then Patrol's famous by that time, and he's very, very famous as a scholar. So Do Chensi starts insulting him as a scholar and say, "Yeah, you know so much, yeah, you really got it all sorted, haven't you?" Then he starts beating him up and kicking him. And then as he's kicking him, he's calling him, "Patrol, you old dog." And the violence of the situation, suddenly is so disturbed, the mind continuum, the consciousness continuum, that suddenly there's an openness, and Dochensi's mind and Patro's mind become one as Buddha mind. And after that, throughout all of his life, Patro Rinpoche was so grateful, and he often signed his compositions, the old dog Patro, because Dochensi called him the old dog, and that made the quantum leap to his understanding. So that's why the text says, it cannot be shown by any statement. This is it. And it cannot be refuted by anything that says that's not it. Inaccessible to the intellect. Not difficult for the intellect. Inaccessible. Inaccessible. I don't know why I'm talking to you. It's all words and thoughts and intellect, isn't it? But anyway, inaccessible to the intellect, the universal essence. Now this word in Sanskrit is dharmata. Dharma means things, every single thing. And the ta that we've had before is shunyata. Dharmata means this nature of everything. So this universal essence is uncreate. It was never created. No things came together to make it happen. It never came into being. It is. Always has been. I mean, that's enough to blow your intellect from the start. How can you get your head around that? But anyway, it's what Karmapa says. Now in the next verse, we get the prime understanding that comes through at the time of pointing out from guru to disciple. Not understanding this. So you please imagine just now, you are there with your guru, whether you've got one or not, but somehow it's all happened. And maybe not in such spectacular circumstances as the tent or the front row of the monastery during an empowerment, but you're there with your teacher, and then this timeless, changeless mind of us all, Buddha mind. You've sat there and shared. Not understanding this, one drifts round and round and round in the ocean of samsara. As long as one hasn't got that fundamental realization, there'll be samsara. When this is understood, Buddha is nowhere else. Everything is devoid of this is it, this isn't it. And then this is very, very interesting. The Karmapa says, may this mystery, this secret of the true nature, the universal ground, be known, ground of everything. Now, sorry, I'm going a bit over time, but I've got one more thing I want to share with you today, and it's going back to where I started a couple of verses before. This simultaneity, the middle way. So now we've gone through what I've described in this session about it's everywhere. And it is not something special. It's the nature of everything, the truth of everything, the true nature of every moment of mind. Then I want to make the point about this simultaneity, not two, in terms of what we call ultimate truth and relative truth. Terms: ultimate truth, relative truth, not ultimate truth, relative lies. Let's take it one step further. The term in Tibetan for relative truth, kunsop dempa. Kunsop means totally fake, dempa means truth. The truth of what is totally fake, and the real truth. So it's the truth about the illusions. So we are a community of minds. Buddha, Dharma is about minds, not about stuff. It's about you, me, this being, that being, enlightened beings, bodhisattvas, the minds. So most minds are confused. They're in their own illusion. I'm in Ken's illusion. You're in your illusion. But there's the truth of those illusions. Even though I'm deluded about stuff, Buddha knows why I'm deluded, the causes and conditions, the history, the whole story of how this way that I see you, I see my parents, I see the world, my whole conditioning. There's the truth of that. The truth of what is untrue. So I wanted to share with you, if I can find it, an image of a little gadget. It's usually sold as a kid's toy, although Akon Rinpoche had one, and it was one of his favorite things. It's a bowl, shallow bowl that's mirrored on the inside, and it has a hole at the top. So what happens when you put something at the bottom of the bowl, and put the lid on, it makes what looks like a hologram just hovering above the bowl. So if you put a coin in the bottom, it looks like there's a coin hovering above it. And Rinpoche would have that in his office. And you couldn't resist it. You went there, whatever you saw, see something, and you can put your fingers through it. So I want to show you an image. This is an image from our dear friend Katie here. She's got one, her kids have got one. So let me, can you see this? This is one of the bowls. It's mirrored. All the inside surface is mirrored. Now that blue stone, which looks like it's on the top, is actually at the bottom of the bowl. You can't see it from here. And you could put your hands in them. People do. You can't. It's there. And your fingers go right through it. So, of course, if you know about optics, mirrors, how the reflection, parabolic reflection comes up, and then how our eyes work, depends on the angle, all of that, you can understand the truth of the illusion. This is the point, right? It's an illusion. There is no blue stone there on top of that pot. It really looks like it. So then once you know how it works, once you know it's an illusion, do you stop seeing this? No, you just see it differently. Okay. So we'll go back to the it and the this of the Karmapa's verses. When you get your pointing out of mind, and when you become a bodhisattva and third, fourth, fifth level bodhisattva, you know the real truth. Change this Buddha nature of everything, every moment. You know the truth of the illusion of relative reality. Now here's the thing, there's Unjuk. There's no ultimate truth that's different up there. This is what all this is about, where you get enlightened. It's in every moment. And that's why even these great teachers, they needed to get it through a fart, through a dog's bark, through a ball of tsampa. Anyway, that's plenty for today. And we did move on very quickly to that verse. That verse doesn't need a lot of unpacking. The one, not understanding this, one drifts around in the ocean of samsara. Now, I was going to share with you what I sent you through as a support material, the Song of Milarepa to Padabun. Maybe we can do that next time. It's a very, very useful one. Thank you. Let's dedicate. And let's in particular dedicate on this anniversary that everything that Akon Rinpoche taught us, that we put it into practice and we value it. We help his teachings and his activity in all sorts of areas to be strong and healthy. And that if it's to be the case that he reincarnates, that his reincarnation meets all the auspicious circumstances and he receives the education, the upbringing, the support that he would so much wish for himself. Sonam die tamche zikpane tobnene pedranam pamchene che ganache palap trukpaye sipe sole rowa rowarisho jancho psemcho rimpoche ma jepanam jejuachik jepa nyampame padam kongne kongdo rowarisho gewadi nyododa chaja chempo drupjone rowa chikjang malopa deye sala kaparajo. Thank you very, very much. So now it's very welcome your comments or questions or anything you'd like to contribute.
Ken, can I ask a question?
Yes, Rose, of course, yeah.
I was, I've been thinking over one of the things you said earlier on today about obviously Buddha nature being present in every situation, in the worst and the most horrendous and the nicest that we can imagine. And I've been really turning it over and thinking, intellectually I know that, but actually how, I'm not sure I do know that. But then I think what I've realized, I just wanted to check this out, is presumably in the most horrendous situations between beings, the Buddha nature is there as a potential, but it's not activated. It's not impacting on whatever happens.
Yeah, I think we need to understand this in terms of experience, our own experience. So if it's something that's happening, let's take I don't know if I can describe it quite honestly. You know, so much depends on this pointing out, after which then all the answers come naturally. Before that, when we have to use words and ideas, it's never really adequate. But in terms of experience, then let's just say to start with, we are witnessing something horrible happening. That movie of something horrible happening is happening in our mind, right? Otherwise, we're not aware of it. It's like you said, everything is mind. Everything that seems out there, whatever the philosophers say, however we rationalize it, the experience we have of so-called out there, other people, life, the world, happens in our mind. Through meditation, we come to see more and more, or to at least believe more and more, that the nature of our mind is Buddha. This mind of ours, which has for its karma to witness that horrible manifestation, this mind has a nature which is pure, which is Buddha. All the things we learn about the nature of mind. I think that's a starting point to work with it. It becomes more challenging when the horrible things happening to ourselves, of course, because then you're in the thick of it. But on another hand, then it can be very, very useful, because it's the whole point of mindfulness, in the Buddhist sense of mindfulness, is that we don't forget the Buddha's teachings, especially in difficult circumstances. So thinking, if you're being aggressed, for instance, the aggressor is a mind, and the true nature of their mind is Buddha. So it's a potential in that case, yes, of course. And my nature is Buddha, and that's the one truth that's here right now. I don't know how helpful that will be, quite honestly, in the relative circumstances, but in terms of the thinking, it's not as though because it's horrible, there is no Buddha nature present in that moment.
Yeah.
It's not other. There is no place in the universe. There is no situation that would be other than mind. A mind, whoever it's in, however it manifests, always has its innate truth and purity. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
the words don't do it. The words don't do it. I think, yeah.
It was a tricky question to try to formulate, and I realised that it would be a tricky answer in terms of putting it into words, because it's not an intellectual word. But thank you.
But I mean, for instance, if we go to what we're commemorating today, what we're remembering, Akon Rinpoche's death, he was stabbed more than 50 times, right? A horrible death. But as far as we know, he didn't fight. He kept his mind very pure. I can't pull it up from my computer just now, but I found, what was it, in 2014, the year after Rinpoche's death, I gave a course in Samiling, recalling his teachings. And I'd found that in the 1990s, I think 1992, he talked to the people doing the Nyungne retreat in Samiling. And he'd more or less described what happened to him. He said, if somebody is there killing you, how do you think? He says, killing you, hurting you so much. And then he said, you think of them as the Buddha. You are grateful to them for giving you an opportunity not to retaliate and to hate and resent, but to feel nothing but compassion and kindness for them. You think of great compassion with beings in the hell realms, because you're only going to die once, and then it's over. But in their experience, they are tortured and tortured pitilessly until it feels like they can take no more and they die, and then they're revived and it starts all over again. So he said that, they were the main things he said, but he was saying, if you're really a bodhisattva, this is how you would face those circumstances. So because we know about Buddha nature and potential, then we know that even the worst person doing the worst thing, in our view, one day will become Buddha. And in their past lives, they could have been so kind. They could have been our own best friend, the person we love more than anybody, our own mother, our own child. So that whole context of we all have Buddha nature, we will all become Buddhas one day, gives a very real, very challenging framework for relating to relative circumstances. And that was probably one of the greatest of all of his teachings, to have died in a state of non-violence in the way he did, despite everything.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to have to go because the landlord's arrived to do some work. So.
Oh well, good. I hope he does a good job. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. It's just
maybe
helping
that's time.
Some time. Yeah.
Time to stop anyway.
Great. Thank you very much, Ken. That's been really valuable today and a lot to reflect on for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We did the dedication, so wish you all super well, and see you all next week. Or see you next week. Bye now.
Cheers. Thank you, Ken. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Ken. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken.
Bye.
Bye-bye.